Do you ever feel like you get a love note from heaven? That's what I wanted to talk about today. I have a friend who associates things with her daughter that passed away with butterflies. And she'll have sometimes a significant thing happen where somehow a butterfly will be involved. Sometimes people give her butterfly themed gifts to help her remember her little girl. Or I've heard of people who hear a particular song at a particular time that reminds them of their loved one. This happened to my daughter and son-in-law when they went to buy a car. My late husband, her dad, was really thorough when it came to investigating cars, and he would definitely have helped them to choose a car. They went to a dealership, and as they had narrowed in on the car they thought was the right one, right then over the speaker system was a song that she very closely identified with her dad. So for her, it felt like a love note from heaven that he was aware of what she was doing and wanted to say, yeah, that's a good choice. Or sometimes people have dreams and see their loved ones in dreams, and even will have messages from them. That happened to my current husband, Michael, when he saw his late wife in a dream, and uh, she came over and gave him a quick hug. And that was like a love note from heaven. One that I already shared previously was from my very first episode with Stacey Henry. She had been praying for an opportunity to run into someone who needed her. She'd been doing something called 40 Days of Prayer. And that day's prayer was that she would be put in the path of somebody who needed to feel God's love. She was literally walking home from her church, and I was on a walk with a friend and my daughter coming towards her. We met at a corner and all turned the same way going down the street. And it was a little weird because we didn't know each other, and yet she kind of joined our walk, the three of us, and we started talking. And I noticed as we were speaking that our husbands seemed to have a lot in common. We shared, have you lived here long? Kind of background things. Both of our husbands had been in the Air Force, and that we had a connection with that. And it occurred to me when we were speaking that she was speaking of him more in a past tense, and I was too. And so I finally said, I lost my husband just a few weeks ago. And at that moment, she stopped, turned to me, and looked straight in my eyes and said, I lost my husband a few years ago. And so we knew that this connection that had been made was really significant, that we were brought to this moment together. Another aspect of that memory is that at that time when we made this connection, someone rode past me on a bicycle wearing a neon colored vest. And if I hadn't seen the person, I could have sworn it was Steve, because that was something that he did. He wore a neon vest and rode a bike all the time. And so I found it to be a love note from heaven that this person happened to ride his bike past just at the precise moment when Stacey and I connected as widows, and she became a great widowing mentor for me because she had been through a similar experience, but it had been a few years out for her, and I was just beginning. So I want to share another one of these love notes from heaven that happened recently. I was on a vacation with a few of my kids and grandkids, the ones that were able to meet up with us, and we were at a beach. And on the beach, my little grandson was playing, and we noticed that he had in his hands a little rubber ducky. Now, that is not necessarily in itself super significant in a lot of contexts, but let me go back in time and tell you a little bit about my husband, Steve, who would be this little boy's grandfather. So Steve grew up in, from about the time he was about 16, he grew up in a house that had a bathtub. At least as he described it, they didn't have a shower, they had a bathtub. And so he grew up taking baths. And even after they moved out of that house and throughout his adult life, he still really enjoyed taking baths. And he had a big rubber ducky that was given to him even as a gag gift, because sometimes what he would do is he would sit in the bathtub. He was a physician, and so he would sometimes go over chart notes or business things. It was not unusual for somebody that he worked with to get a phone call from him and hear sloshing water in the background because he liked to relax in the bathtub and work on his chart notes. And it was just a funny, particular thing about him that he would bring his work into the bathtub and he'd be in there for a long time, just, sitting in the bath. He'd drain the water. He'd still be sitting in there doing work. But it's easy to associate a rubber ducky with him. So when I go back to this story at the beach, the context of it is that it was one of the first time, it wasn't the first event that we had had together with children and grandchildren and my new husband, Michael. But we're trying to take our families and create a new dynamic and find a way to bond with each other, in spite of the fact that we have children who mourn their parents. His sons mourn their mother. My children mourn their father. And so I had been praying that we would just have some assistance to help us to find some joy together in this new journey, and that we would start to come together as a new family dynamic. And I had definitely had on my mind the question, is Steve aware of our family? Does he see what's happening? Can he help us to bond? This was just exactly what I had been thinking very soon before we went to go to the beach. And at the beach, I saw my little grandson. He's 2 years old. He was sitting on the sand, and in his hand, he had a little rubber ducky. And we hadn't brought the rubber ducky with us. But somehow, in the very particular place that we ended up on this beach, there was a little rubber ducky. That in itself was an answer to me that, yes, Steve was aware of us and was sending us a love note from heaven. But when we inspected it, and this is the crazy part, on the little rubber ducky had been written the name Steve. Right there on that little rubber ducky. So here was my little grandson holding a rubber ducky with the name Steve on it, which I felt was an absolute love note from heaven, from his grandpa, to all of us that, yes, He is aware of us and loves us and was sending us a little indication that we are loved. I hope as you look around and try to see things not as coincidence, but as love notes from heaven, that you'll start to find ways that your loved ones are remembering you just as you remember them.